ask that question.
Well, I thank my friend from South Carolina as well as my friend from Arizona with respect to the debate that they have been engaged in here and for bringing this issue to the forefront, being willing to stand up and say, hey, you know, foreign aid, if you talk about that in the coffee club in Seneca, South Carolina, or Phoenix, Arizona, or Moultrie, Georgia, is not the most popular topic. And most people back home think we can balance the budget if we eliminate foreign aid, but the fact is that, as Senator Graham said, it's a fairly minuscule amount in the overall context. And right now, we're at a critical juncture in our country with respect to our fiscal house, with respect to any number of domestic and foreign policies. And as we go into the election, the American people are going to have a choice to make. But we're also at a crossroads with our foreign policy in this country. All you have to do is pick up this morning's paper, turn on the TV today, and you see what's happening in countries that are the subject of this particular amendment. There are tens of thousands of people protesting in Pakistan today. There are folks in Egypt that are still protesting. There are folks in Libya that are still protesting. We're 10 days away from the ambassador to Libya from the United States of America having been killed. We know that part of the world is in a turmoil. We know that that part of the world also has been very critical to our fight against the war, or fight in the war on terrorism. And when the President of the United States is asked a question, is Egypt an ally, and he can't answer that question affirmatively, that tells you what kind of foreign policy this particular president has. He doesn't know what his foreign policy is if he can't tell you whether Egypt is an ally. Well, let me tell you, in spite of all that's happened in the last 10 days, and all of us still grieve for the loss of 4 very brave Americans who put their life in harm's way as civilians to advocate what's in the best interest of our country. But I will assure you, if Ambassador Stevens was here today, he would say absolutely the direction which the Paul Amendment takes us is the wrong direction in which to go. I know what the intelligence community thinks about this particular direction. I know that the intelligence committee thinks that in spite of all of our problems with Pakistan, and we've had our very open and overt problems with Pakistan over the last several months and couple of years, but the fact is that we've got American soldiers in harm's way today in Afghanistan who are fighting to protect the freedoms of this country and who are fighting to make sure that we remain the safest, most secure country in the world. And you cannot decouple Afghanistan and Pakistan. It is very important that we maintain a strong relationship with Pakistan, even though it is difficult and even though it is fractured. It's of critical importance that we maintain that relationship. It's important because of what's happening in Afghanistan, but it's also very important for another reason. We had a debate in this body about a year ago on what's called the START Treaty, which is a treaty that we have with Russia for the elimination of certain nuclear weapons over a period of time. During the course of that debate, we talked about the elimination of Russian nuclear weapons versus weapons in the United States, and that's good to a certain extent, but none of us in this body who have any idea about intelligence around the world have a great fear of any country getting a hold of a ICBM, a major intercontinental ballistic missile, sticking it in a sleeve somewhere and shooting it towards the United States. What we do have fear of is somebody getting a hold of what we call tactical nuclear weapons, sticking them in a suitcase and bringing them to the United States or putting them in a position to kill and harm Americans. Pakistan has tactical nuclear weapons. And as long as we maintain a strong relationship with them, as long as they are our ally, however you characterize that, then we have the ability to at least dialogue with respect to with the Pakistanis with respect to their nuclear program. But even today, and I'll close with this with respect to that issue, even today, with all that's happened over the last 10 days and all the condemnation around the world from democratic countries and particularly within the United States for the condemnation of what's happened and the consternation and appall at what's taking place from the standpoint of demonstrations in Pakistan and in Libya. The Libyan government and the Pakistani government have given us all the help that they can possibly give us, particularly in Libya. That's a government in transition. It's a temporary government. And we need to make sure that the people of Libya have the opportunity to hopefully have a democratic form of government one day. If we sever ties with them today, folks, that's over. And we can just make certain of the fact that we have one more territory, one more country where terrorists have the opportunity to be trained to kill and harm Americans. With respect to Pakistan, the Pak government has sent the Palace Guard to guard the embassy of the United States. That's their most elite troops. Now again, our relationship is frayed and is fractured, but they are doing their level best to try to make sure that the Americans that remain in Pakistan are protected. And if we all of a sudden decide that we're going to cut them off from financial aid, is that going to improve the situation there? Is it going to give us some sort of satisfaction? It may, from the standpoint of folks who don't like the idea of foreign aid, period. But let me tell you, from a national security standpoint, it is simply the wrong thing to do. There will be one country that will gain from this. The country that will gain from this is the most notorious terrorist-sponsoring nation in the world, and that's Iran. Iran has a very powerful presence in Pakistan today. They want to have a powerful presence in Libya, and I assure you that if we cut off the minimal amount of aid that's being talked about with this amendment, then we are simply fostering the ability of Iran to have a larger voice and a larger presence in countries that are very fractious and very vulnerable today. So while in spirit, I agree with my good friend Rand, Senator Paul, this is not the right time in the history of our country and not the right time in the history of the world to take action that is simply not in the best interest of the United States.
The senator from Arizona.
In the last few days.